Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 03 of Shunya 1. And looks like we're getting the hang of how things are going here. And I'm happy to be back this week and talk to a lot more interesting people. Listening to your feedback. We're getting quite a bit of comments on Twitter. And I think we are going to soon start a submission channel to get more ideas and get more topics in. So thanks so much. Thanks for all the feedback. Thanks for all the support so far.
I'll get it running before before this episode gets out. I'll get the Slack channel up and running. So there will be a Slack channel called Shunya 1. Look at the website, ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1, and I'll put a link over there for how you can sign up to be a member of that Slack channel.
Great. Thanks so much. So let me introduce our guests today. We have Amit.
Hello.
Our regular here and our friendly tech banter person for this episode as well. But again, he's doing a great job. Thanks for having us, Amit. Thanks for helping start this whole thing off.
I think this is a lot of fun to do. Seriously, I just love doing it.
And my guest for today is another very good friend of mine and someone who's from out of town. And I'm lucky to have bought some, while he's still jet lagged, get some hours from him to come and do this for us. So introducing Raj. Raj is American, but he's also Indian and Bengali like me.
Yeah,
and we speak a lot about how
we used to be goatee buddies too. At some
yes,
point.
Yes.
Now you have a full-grown beard.
That's true. Sorry, I moved on. But like we were saying, if I have to consider my facial hair when I move when I go back to the US, if I do it this year. That's a whole different topic. But thanks so much for being here, Raj.
Thank you very much.
And
glad to be here.
Just to give you a little feedback on how I know Raj. So Raj is an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, exited entrepreneur. I'm using all the buzzwords to make sure people keep listening to this. And he's, of course, a very successful entrepreneur and now an angel investor himself. And yes, now we got more startup people listening to this once I said that.
All right.
And you can find his details in the bio.
Yeah.
Raj is also a great friend now. And I think what's fun is that while he lives in the US, he keeps coming back to India, especially Bangalore. He has a big team there. He's done multiple companies with back office in Bangalore and, selling abroad. And he's gone through multiple exits, and one of them being an IPO. So I think I really think the kind of stories you have, Raj, are going to be interesting for our listeners today.
Let's do it.
And it'll be fun to hear context of how you see the startup ecosystem here, the tech scene here.
It's probably good to provide even more context on just the background and if we have a little time. But I've been coming back and forth between India and the US, or US and India, for the past 15 years, I guess.
Yeah.
And, it's usually, and I've always seen a connection between, kind of the technology world and the technology, kind of scene in India, kind of bridged with what's happening in the U.S. I had my first company, I had a company in Calcutta for 4 years, and it was a services company, and essentially, at some point, it had gone through a very small exit, a very small one, but at some point I had to go back to the U.S. and kind of regroup and figure out technology, and having been away from kind of like the Web 2.0 space.
Right. And you're talking about a bootstrapped service company.
Yep.
Old school, the way all of us, funnily enough, old people in the room have done it.
Yeah.
So not like how now when you wake up and get money thrown at you.
I'd like to get some money thrown at me.
But yeah, so thanks so much for being here, Raj.
Thanks.
So,
appreciate it.
So we've been chatting about a bunch of stuff that happened this week, of course, and obviously a lot more topics about one of the things we chat about here a lot is, I think, cybersecurity. That's been a hot topic for a while. And one of the things we've been chatting about is also, while we've covered this before, just to take a leaf off from the last conversation, what do you think about Indians and Indian founders and Indian startups? How much do you think they care enough about all these various layers of their products, like security as a layer, APIs in general, using, spending the time and effort and money to get things that get their products world class. Do you think over the years you've seen that improve? I know initially a lot of hack jobs existed. Because the arbitrage of the US dollar and India was so big, people used to basically go by doing a piss poor job sometimes. But now that, now we have such a big consumer base here as well. So how have you seen the landscape of products and what founders and companies value today? Has that changed? Do you think that's improving, or what's your take on it?
It's a good question. So I think there's two questions there in terms of I guess products and how Indian founders look at kind of the businesses they're trying to build. I think over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a lot of e-commerce companies kind of it was kind of these waves of trends, right? There's a whole kind of smorgasbord of travel startups that showed up, right? I think it was Ixigo, Ibibo, and a bunch of these guys,
right?
And then I think that was one trend, and then another trend was obviously e-commerce. Right. E-commerce is still here, I think, in a big way. But I think that in the kind of I guess I call it like the long tail of startups that are all over the place here, from Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, and whatnot. I think there's always, for me at least, what way I see it is, I've seen most of these startups kind of are kind of like there's this one-to-one relationship between a version of a startup that's happening in the U.S. somewhere in Silicon Valley, and then say, okay, well, I'm going to do the same thing, here in India, and that's fine. That's okay. That's a total. And that might work.
Concept arbitrage, right? That's what that's called.
Yep, it's concept arbitrage. Exactly.
Yeah.
Grofers
it's
and
just
Instacart.
called copying.
Yeah, it's
not really, because you got to localize, right? Yelp and Zomato are not the same, even though they are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah. So
I mean, the good guys know how to localize. And to what extent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they also copy when they know there's a latent opportunity. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't just copy just for the heck of it.
I was shocked when I saw a Grofers bag. I saw, and it literally looked like an Instacart bag from the US.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was looking at it and I was like, man, this is exactly like an Instacart bag,
right.
So, right. I mean, that's a really crazy example, but, there's just this one-to-one relationship, there's some company being built on, I can't even think of a good example here, but some company in Silicon Valley that's building, I don't know, some, subscription commerce thing, and next thing you know, it's happening here. There's just, APIs, and there's a lot of stuff that I've seen that are just essentially this, but for India, right? Which is fine, again, but a lot of things don't translate well, right? But it is definitely kind of a breeding ground, I guess, for concepts like that to exist here.
I think that's what will happen, right? As you will see a certain amount of copying and Me Too's and stuff like that, right? And then as the entrepreneurial space as such, right? The entrepreneurs are getting into these things now, right? I mean, I feel like there is a certain amount of evolution that has happened over the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. I would say that what you're saying was true in the early app days.
Sure.
I feel like that is now kind of not as true anymore. Because not to say that, it doesn't start with the germ of an idea that might come from anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. But then the way that you kind of have to execute on that is that's really different from country to country, right? Mm-hmm. Working in India is very different than working pretty much anywhere else in the world, right? I mean, so the ability to just take what they're doing on the hottest new iPhone app and apply that to India isn't always gonna kind of this. I mean, our payment systems are different, significantly different, right? I mean, the way that traffic is driven is significantly different. Consumption of media is significantly different. The number of languages, it's not a homogeneous country in the way.
Simply data, right?
Yeah.
So we were chatting about this, how the biggest localization most apps, the smart ones, have actually had to do is how you cannot assume the ubiquity of data access and data coverage in a country like ours, even though that's booming, and we've chatted about this before, how that's really proliferating usage of certain apps. But at the same time, YouTube still has an offline mode because people download over Wi-Fi and then watch later. Then and now we're seeing a lot of apps now have light models. We're going back from mobile web, app only to more hybrid. It's progressive web apps are interesting.
Absolutely.
Hybrid.
I mean, I got like, so to me, I feel really strongly about this, right? I feel like the app ecosystem that's developed in the way that the technology has moved in the last 7 years, right? Let's say, right, over the last 7 years, where everything has gone back to everything is an app. I feel like that is not a positive trend. We needed Web 2.0 to break out of the Windows hegemony, right? I mean, hegemony. The same thing we need right now to break out of Android versus iOS, right? I mean, like everything right now, you get locked in so tightly into Android or iOS. I have 50 apps on my Android phone, which I bought at different points in time, right? I have 30 apps on my iPad that I bought at different points in time. Why can these things not just happen on the web? I mean, like you get locked in to a degree which is not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely impacts app developers who are playing in the sandboxes owned by Google and Apple. But let me take a step back and talk about that. The companies in India that are doing kind of startups and really talk about one specific thing that I've noticed, or I think is worth thinking about, is this idea that the world is essentially the market of opportunity for startups here in India. It's no longer the case that, or rather, it shouldn't be the case that companies should be thinking about India as being their market. You can build a SaaS company here in India and market anywhere in the world. And that is actually the leverage and the power of possibility that spans beyond this idea that I'm building a company thinking about India as a market. I mean, there's obviously going to be startups that are going to try to figure out logistics and delivery and all sorts of other kinds of concepts as it relates to the Indian market. As a related topic, venture capitalists, at least the ones that are like the arms of their kind of headquarters somewhere in Silicon Valley. I think one of the reasons why you have a lot of startups that are focusing on the Indian market is because a lot of the mandate that's coming down
is to do that.
Is to basically fund companies that are focused on the Indian market. Meanwhile, leaves a huge kind of hole in terms of companies that should be thinking about I can build a product that somebody in London can use, or somebody in Canada or US, and that's the whole power of the whole thing. It's the opposite of outsourcing or the opposite of offshoring or BPO. BPO is like cost advantage by virtue of having things done here, at least from a services perspective. But if a product company here can sell global, that's the ultimate arbitrage, right?
Right, but I think so. There are certain. I think that what you're saying is true, right? But I think there are different kinds of companies that will work in different spaces, right? Like so, Zoho is doing what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Zoho is selling everywhere, right? So is Zendesk, was that it? Or
Freshdesk.
Yeah.
So they also sell everywhere, right? So I mean, like there are a number of them which do.
There I think there is like if you counted them, there would probably be like 2 handfuls of them.
Right.
But there's still so much more opportunity.
I don't deny that at all.
There's a lot.
But the thing is, I think that what occurs to the Indian entrepreneur is that. The opportunity in India, especially because it is so different doing business over here than it is doing in most other large markets, that is the kind of special thing that they can bring to the business that they're going to make, right? How do I tackle the Indian market for a certain concept? How do I make that work? And I think that's why you do see these kinds of concept arbitrages happening.
That's true. That's true. But I think what at least I know what Roger's experience has been like, it depends on where the founder is also based out of, right? So all these companies which still have like one leg in India and one leg in the States, let's say, always do the selling in the US, and they do back-end and dev and UX, which is a very important layer, which we were talking about. How if your UX isn't right, it's not going to sell, compete with the products in the valley. That's one model. That's definitely a model which I think what he was trying to say is we're not capitalizing enough on it.
InMobi's InMobi's a perfect example of a company that is doing it well.
Right.
They have they're building the product. They're headquartered in Bangalore, and for them, they're conquering China now.
Right.
They're the world is their oyster.
The world. When I say world as a market, is probably it could be not US. It could be even. I know a bunch of startups who are actually again going the other side of the world. They're going to Southeast Asia. They're going to Africa. So definitely, I think Indians and founders here have
It's
they know the opportunity
thing. It's
exists.
a powerful thing to be able to say, I can build right here in India, and I
Right.
can.
You can probably test here as well.
Of course.
You can test. You can refine your product here
Right.
at much lower cost, and then.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
go
like, I
outside.
don't mean to say in any way whatsoever that Indian companies can't build world-class products that can compete
Yeah.
across the board. I mean, like, I think that absolutely can, should, and will happen. I was just trying.
And one of the just to pull back
Yeah.
into one of the examples is the biggest FinTech. By the way, FinTech as another cycle is also, we're in the middle or peak of that already.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's being led by Paytm,
Yep.
right? And Paytm, as it's grown, it's completely indigenous, very localized. They grew like nuts with all the specific India kind of hacks, right?
Right.
Cashbacks and whatnot. And now they've just become a bank this week, which is like they've taken a move into the old school finance arena with the big guys. But they're doing that very consciously. On one hand, they're doing that, and just last month they launched in Canada, which is
I
a
didn't know
very
that.
interesting market.
Wow.
Right,
Yeah, which is a very interesting
So
move.
what's the use case there?
So they launched their wallet in Canada.
Okay.
And their payment services. So you can pay your electricity bills on Paytm in Canada.
In Canada.
Yes.
Oh wow.
So they went. Obviously, they have a satellite office there. One of the founders, core team members, sits out of there, and so on. But they realized that what they've done in India can be replicated abroad. Obviously, need some feet on the ground, maybe, but the brand now exists, and they can take that product and they'll take it there. They've launched a bunch of innovative stuff, even for India. Again, they've launched like digital gold and whatnot. But I think while the rest of the fintech story here plays out, these guys are they know how big this can get.
The opportunity is massive for them.
Yeah, and
Do you think that? I mean, a question I have for you, Shila, is that what's your perspective on whether or not that's something special to Paytm, and is something that, versus the ability for another startup to get into the fintech space?
I think there's a bunch of them already in fintech. In fact, fintech's already seen some big guys and guys who have dipped because they didn't stay the long game. But I think there's a lot of opportunity simply because these guys are leading from the front by breaking the traditional barriers to entry. Like most people didn't want to get into fintech earlier because of the red tape you had to go through just to start something in this space. But they're making those thresholds easier for someone else to think, hey, okay, at least I know they've made it easy to do the basic steps. Can I add another service layer on top of that and do something different?
Do you think that it's ultimately the case that Paytm is going to be the API layer or the layer that sits underneath other startups?
It's
that will
possible
build?
if they allow
I think
that.
that happens. I think I feel like WhatsApp has really kind of has really missed the boat on this, right? I mean, like they should have had their payment stuff up and running before now.
Right. And they're thinking about it now.
They're looking at doing it. They want to do it through Beam.
Right.
But we're still looking at like 8 months, 10 months before it launches anything.
It's funny you
right?
mention that because I think you're right. I think surprising to me is that Facebook has invested so much in messenger apps, and chatbots, and extensions now, and really kind of left WhatsApp alone. When the reality is that WhatsApp for the demos,
For the rest of the world,
for the demos that actually use WhatsApp as their primary communication tool, that was the ideal platform.
It absolutely
for
is.
this, considering WeChat in China
Exactly.
is the platform, right?
It should have been there by now. It should have
It's a good
absolutely been there
point,
by now.
Yeah.
No, so that's where again, right? All the learnings. So WhatsApp is a global product, but they use India as the biggest learning base. There's similar global products like a Truecaller. I think Truecaller is really on the verge of something. It's going to see a WhatsApp moment if it's not already, and I think if there's going to be one, they're going to be the next guys to do it. But India is their biggest market. So we have, with our growing mobile population, with our growing consumer base also in general, while we may not be high-value consumers, all of us, but...
And nobody caring about privacy, let's not forget that part of it.
Oh, yes. I'm going to bring back the conversation to that. And in fact, FinTech is an interesting context to talk about that because the biggest FinTech opportunities in India over the last... The apps which have become big doing FinTech services have actually become big by one biggest growth hack which Android has given Indians, which is ability to read your SMS message.
Yeah.
Wow.
Walnut.
And Walnut and a whole bunch
There
of
are a
other
couple
guys.
other ones too,
So many
yeah.
of us, right?
What's Walnut?
Walnut is
It reads your SMSs. You get all these notifications, right?
Is that an app?
Yeah, it's an app. So basically what it does is it reads your SMSs, and then your SMSs get all your payment notifications, right? Over here, every transaction you do, whether it's a credit card or bank check clearing or this or that, everything comes in, you get an SMS notification.
So what's the value of Walnut to the user?
It creates a dashboard for you.
Oh, okay.
So it
contextualizes and
so it told me last week that you spent 228% more than you did in the previous week. Would you like to know why?
Oh, so it's actually an opt-in service.
yes,
that actually rides on the SMS
Correct.
system.
Yes.
absolutely.
I see.
And
That's a less nefarious
hi to
way.
my friend Amit, who's the founder. So if you're
okay.
listening, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those guys obviously they were one of the first guys to do it,
Right.
and they actually did it completely offline. They said we are not going to upload anything. We're just
Right.
going to manage data on the phone.
Right.
And then upload is opt-in further. Like if you really want to do cloud backup, then go for
So,
that.
and actually, they had a really interesting marketing thing during demonetization, which I don't know if that has, but I thought it was kind of interesting to bring up. You get SMSs for every ATM transaction, right? So what they had is on the app, they built in something saying that which is the ATM around you that was active latest.
Yeah, and which one had money? Because ATMs are running dry
out of
in
money,
India.
right?
So
During
it's the
demonetization.
crowdsourced data to be able to provide
exactly.
that.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
that was I use that all the time, right? I need ATM. Okay, what's the closest one that has some money in it? Okay, this ATM was used an hour and a half ago. It probably doesn't.
Probably
have
is
some money
dispensing,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's funny, right? So that one growth hack actually now has made people who are doing financial credit products, they're actually using your financial history from your SMS to give you credit or make a good enough guess on your credit worthiness. And it's basically disrupting the credit rating system. It's using massive piles of data from a bunch of these things to find out, to profile you as a user, to make you understand.
So to understand this correctly, so Walnut's doing this in an opt-in fashion, but the others are kind of just doing that as just a permission.
Well, it's an add-on kind of this, right?
Okay.
So I know that like one of the HDFC apps does this as well, right? But it's an add-on to their existing functionality. They tell you what they're doing and they give you an option to come in or come out.
But
tyranny
I
of
think
defaults, man. I mean, like
I
everybody
think
does it.
I think a lot of apps have capitalized on this permission a little too much.
Oh yeah.
And definitely a lot of them which we all know, like you can read, if you're a geek enough, you can actually read the packet data which is being sent in the background on Android. Again, the openness of the OS allows you to do that. And you see a lot of apps which have nothing to do with anything ask for permission and then send that data back. So
some of the most insidious ones are like what apps you have installed on your phone. Like, why does anybody need to know what apps you have installed on your phone?
it's all, and it's used to market to you.
So the question I have for you guys is, what's your perspective on like the palatability of privacy? I mean, in India.
If you have it, this is the attitude of everybody in this country.
Yeah.
If I haven't done anything wrong, what do I have to worry about?
Right.
That is the simple attitude of
And
everybody.
no one cares about
one
privacy.
They're
willing to give it up for a five rupee cashback.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Pretty much.
So let me tell you about
it's so different than the U.S. I mean, it's an insane. It's like
So
it's insane.
I was involved with this startup called Madlock a couple of years ago, and it was the biggest privacy violation you could possibly imagine. What we did was we would put an ad on your Android front screen, and we would pay you 1 rupee a day for keeping that ad. And in exchange, we would pull all the data from your phone.
So what year was that?
This was 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I was in that too. that's what at least that's what perk one of the perk apps, the companies I started, one of the apps was called a perk screen where you could unlock your phone and earn a currency for doing so.
Exactly.
I don't know if we actually pull any data.
We pulled everything.
We actually you did the data. You probably did the data play. We had advertising on the lock screen.
So we were trying to do advertising, but it was difficult to get that going, and then Google blocked us because they had issues with that.
Yeah. We got blocked by Google as well.
Yeah,
we never get it back.
It's just I guess that's a different conversation, man. The lack of transparency around the blocking. I get it was a scammy product, and I get that they probably should have blocked it.
Right,
but there needs to be some transparency on this stuff because we followed every guideline perfectly.
This is example of what you were saying before about the problem of
Depending,
app stores
exactly,
versus
being dependent
the web,
on this, yeah.
right? Webs, but on the other hand, web platforms, if you think about it, the reason why people deal with app stores or are okay with app stores is because they think of app stores as a protecting layer on what the web...
On one end. On one end, it's protecting.
You don't have exe files that you're accidentally downloading or whatever version of an APK that could, you could sideload onto your phone.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's the flip side of why things shouldn't be shouldn't be sitting on the web.
But then a browser is
you're
supposed to be able to
relinquishing-
manage that, right? I mean, like today's
Agreed.
modern browsers should be able to kind of decide what should and should not be rendered by it.
Right. No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing. There's a company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this company called Brave. It's a
new
web
it's a browser. Yeah, it's like that
So
completely privacy browser.
So the creator of JavaScript is his company, and essentially it's a browser for mobile and desktop that has ad blocking built in.
Right.
And it also, so you're right. I think the browser can serve as a layer for a lot of this stuff. But I think that there's kind of a conflict of interest because the folks that make the browser make the operating system and the app store,
the app store, and the ads,
and the whole thing, the whole stack.
So but it does lead to a lot of platform lock-in, right? I mean, so in my opinion, right, and I could be wrong about this, but in my opinion, Windows Phone was a better operating system than either Android or iOS. Okay, and it didn't work because nobody was making apps for it. And the reason nobody was making apps for it is because everybody was making apps for iOS.
Yeah, it was
and Android.
There was a chicken and egg problem.
It was a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah,
if most of the functions that we were using were browser based, I would bet that Windows Phone would still be around and doing good.
I believe that. It came down to a dearth of apps.
I mean, I bought my mom a Windows Phone, and she refused to move for a year. She's like, "No, I'm going to use this phone. I'm going to use this phone because the Android phones are stupid, and this phone is not good, and the iPhone sucks, and I just want to use this phone." And same thing. I have another friend, a cousin of mine, got a Windows Phone way back when. He's still buying like these old Windows phones, like used off
he's
eBay.
trying to be a collector.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I mean, like it's just like you get used to the.
It had its moment,
Yeah.
right? It had its moment, and a lot of people saw the pros and cons of various other OSs.
Right.
But yeah, like you said, like it's what killed the BlackBerry.
It is.
It's what
It's
killed.
absolutely what
It's
killed
what
the
killed.
BlackBerry.
WhatsApp was ubiquitous, and they've killed BlackBerry Messenger, and that's the reason. Like even iMessage is still. It's very US and OS. It's a very market specific.
It's US. It's a US specific thing. It's the only people I get SMSs from today are people who are on iMessage. Otherwise, I don't get it.
And that brings back to the point why people in India don't care about SMS because they anyway use their private chats on WhatsApp. And they know that no one can read my private shady messages.
This has always been fast. Yeah.
No, I don't care about my bank messages.
Yeah.
Who the hell cares?
Well, this is what's so fascinating about the Indian market for me, being in the U.S. and coming here is just how much of opportunity there is here because it's the wild, wild west. In a lot of ways, it is the wild, wild west.
Right.
There are things that you just could never get away with in the U.S. that are a pure opportunity here.
Yep.
I mean, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, at least kind of contrasting, SMS charges from back in the day. Incoming SMSs are free here, so what was it, missed calls and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, missed call is a very unique product.
That's an Indian thing. Yeah, that's
it's an Indian thing, right? But in the U.S. was a laggard in the sense that it used to cost 10 cents to send a text message.
Yeah.
It was insanely expensive, and a lot of these companies started showing up that were startups built on the backs of when the pricing structure changed from SMS being 10 cents SMS to hey, pay $5 and get all you can eat SMS packages, right? So it's just fascinating to me when you contrast like the opportunities in India as a direct result of like the fact that the culture of privacy here
does not exist.
Does not exist. You're like, okay, well that's
we can do this. Let's do this.
Let's go do this. Let's go use information like which apps you have installed. The bundle IDs and everything to be able to target ads to you better. Based on profiling or making personas on your.
Let me ask you, what's the best since you have a team in Bangalore? So, what's the best kind of? And sure, like over the years you've built a few kinds of products. Most of them have been US centric as a market, right? But why? How did that happen? Why did you choose Bangalore as your dev space? And why didn't you ever think about doing something? Because you're hiring from the same pool of ecosystems which the Indian startups hire from. But you didn't see India as an opportunity. How come? For the same kind of products?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it just comes from just the fact that I was in the U.S. It was a simple thing. Bangalore seemed like an obvious place to set up shop just because that's where everyone did it, or that's where everyone does it.
Right.
I had burned my fingers and doing things in Calcutta for 4 years there, and that's probably another topic where we can cover it now. But ultimately Bangalore seemed accessible, and it was also accessible. I would have chosen Pune. Pune seemed like a great place as well. It just seemed like I didn't want to take the bus ride from Bombay, and I didn't want to transfer. They'll do that transfer and everything, and that's changed over the last 10 years in terms of how easy it is to do the transfers in Bombay. But Bangalore was accessible. Talent seemed to be there. That was...
but I think technology talent is probably concentrated in Bangalore more so than other places.
For sure. And so, yeah, I mean, it seemed like that's what all the cool kids were doing, and that's where things where it made sense to set up shop.
Nice.
And I think it's changed, though. I think that there are a lot of, I don't know you call them tier 2 cities here, but smaller cities.
Yeah, Chandigarh. I know some people are doing a lot of stuff out of Chandigarh, man.
Yeah.
Chandigarh, Jaipur, by the way.
Jaipur too.
Jaipur has a lot of back offices.
Indore has a lot.
And Kochi. I think Kochi.
Kochi
There's
too.
a lot of really interesting, companies there. And, I think that I think as a general strategy for the future, and if I had to press the undo button or try it again, and I essentially am there right now, is I would look at these other cities as base, right?
Nice.
I think it's expensive. Bangalore is dealing with a lot of expensive people, talent as a result
real
of
estate, everything, man.
everything, right? And so, and here's the problem. Ultimately, in his dealing with this notice period stuff, it's just absolute nonsense to move as fast as you can, and then have to, and have startups are moving at a certain pace.
Right.
You're dealing with 2-month notice periods. 2 or 3 months. Your startup might not be alive in 3 months.
So that stems from the native insecurity we have. While we are okay to give away our privacy, we're very insecure about losing people, losing everything. We're like, this is the opportunistic mindset. We're all fundamentally very opportunist. So we're like, this is an opportunity. Let's jump. Before anyone notices, let's make as much money as we can, hoard all the people, and then let's hope no one figures out.
There's this company. What's a startup called? I think it was called My Notice Period or something like that.
Yes.
And they became like Hiree or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're all about it's so mercenary, man. The whole idea was you're serving out your notice period, and you're just basically kind of a free agent saying, "Hey, make me a better offer, and I'll skip out on
shopping."
Shopping, which is that opportunistic nature, which is crazy because if I would never even use them as a platform because my first thought would be, that's just bad culture.
No, and exactly, the person who is willing to do this is not somebody I want working with me.
There's this question of
On that note, I mean, we'll just take a quick break.
Sure.
But on that note, while we have opportunity taking as in our nature, even the biggest startups founder in the world of Mark Zuckerberg also said that if you don't, you might not luck out. So we're going to come back with that.
Are you confused about your future education options?
Not sure about whether you should be doing an MBA?
Or if design school is the right fit for you?
Are you worried about how you would finance your education?
Find answers to this and a lot more education-related topics on this podcast.
Hi, my name is Akhil Daswani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OnCourse.
Hi, my name is Alisha Mashruwala. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OnCourse.
And we both are your co-hosts for the OnCourse podcast. Tune in every Monday on the IBM podcast app or any other podcast app you may like.
Hey, so coming back to, how while we have taking opportunities in our nature and we're freakishly insecure about them as well. In fact, that actually stems from growing up, I guess, where if you're taught to if you're not first, someone else is going to be first in class.
Scarcity.
So scarcity, right? Yeah. The rat race mentality and so on. But that probably, if used right, if not used for evil, is probably why we have that DNA of survival and making stuff work. And like Mark, like I was mentioning. Mark said in the Harvard address he gave this week that startups are not about figuring out, like you said, an eureka moment. They are hard work along the way.
I mean, I think the big takeaway from this commencement address, which I think is I mean, likely going to. I think it's going to go in the history books as a pretty strong message that you can refer back to over time. I think Steve Jobs has one as well, in his Stanford commencement address. But ultimately, this idea that it's actually a corollary of what Steve Jobs said about dot connecting. Steve Jobs said, you have to trust that the dots are going to connect going forward.
Right.
You can't really predict how they're going to connect, if you just kind of plan forward. And that's exactly what Mark Zuckerberg kind of alluded to as well, in the sense that you don't really have this eureka moment and say, I know, I'm going to go build this thing and it's going to happen in the following sequence of events. And then this is how I'm going to go, get to some finish line, whether it's an exit or an IPO, whatever it is. You actually should just go do it. Just go build the thing, and you're kind of traveling through fog. And you're taking a few steps, and you're going to learn along the way, and then you kind of expand your horizon and see more things kind of appear as a result of taking that first step. And that's as you said, it can be an opportunity to figure out your path as you're walking it. Right. And that's a big deal, I think, in terms of rather, a lot of startups in Silicon Valley, and this is a comparison to companies here, are really about experimentation. Like you're basically a thought experiment guy. You're going to run your experiment to see, maybe this is a product that people want, and then you get a little further along, and you realize, whether the data supports that they do or they don't. Here, I think it's like, I'm going to go start a company. And you just, it's more coming. It's coming from a sense. I want to do the company, but I don't really know. But maybe it's not even a company that you should be starting. Maybe it's just a project, right? And that's actually what Zuckerberg said as well. Zuckerberg's like, look, I thought this was going to be just good enough being a social network for folks at Harvard.
Right.
I didn't know that I was going to connect all these people. I thought that someone else would do it. I thought that Google and Microsoft had the power and the capacity to go do this thing, but they had not. And so through his journey, Facebook was born. At least the vision of Facebook was actually born through that.
It evolves, right?
It evolves.
Everything has to constantly evolve.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there's this idea, and I think he actually goes into this notion of Hollywood does a very rotten job of showing how it really is. It's not like this extremely kind of calculated path. And what happens is that people watch that stuff and they think that's how you're supposed to do it. And that's it's grossly incorrect in terms of what really happens.
I don't generally like war metaphors for business, right? But I mean, like, there is truth to the idea that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, like, as soon as you start actually doing something, your plan is... I have a 40-page business plan, which I put together for what this company was supposed to be 2 years ago. And the way we've evolved is so completely different. It's not even this, right?
I actually have a big thing against business plans in general.
You know what? It's funny. There's what's his name?
It's a good time to talk about how I got Raj to invest in my company.
Okay.
Because we literally met at a random event, which he got invited to in the morning.
Okay.
While
also fairly randomly.
Through a mutual friend of ours, and we were just there. Anish and I were just there, and Raj was there, and we got talking over a few beers. Mm-hmm. And he said, dude, this is awesome. And then that's just happened. And the next day, it just worked out. So I don't think you've ever seen a business plan.
No.
Yeah.
No. So, I don't. It's a golden rule. I don't like the idea of being judged by a business plan. Because the last time I ever did a business plan or I ever put together a forecast, if I look back at it 2 years later, my predictions are way off.
Yeah, you'd never know, right? I mean, you don't know what lines of business are going to take off, what lines of business are going to this, where you're going to find your customers. You don't know.
The CEO of 37 Signals, and his name escapes me at this moment.
Jason Fried.
Jason Fried, exactly. Jason Fried. So he wrote a Medium article about the fact that just replace the word plan with guess. When you're saying business plan, it's a business guess. It's what it is. It's a business guess. And, it's not a plan. I mean, it's good to plan. It's good to have some general architecture around what you're going to do. Right. But as far as the notion that this is how it's going to pan out, I've never had a plan. I've never had a forecast be on the dot or even closely.
I mean, like, when I look at what I had planned for this thing, right? I mean, like, our entire business was supposed to go in a particular direction.
Yep.
We thought that we would sell advertising against content.
Yep.
We would put ads in certain, like, we do insert ads and stuff like that. But that's not how this business has gone at all.
And you have to go forward to figure that
Yeah.
out. And that's the problem with business plans. Again, is that once again you're trying to collect all the data up front as if you know where you're going, and it just doesn't work that way.
But see,
It
you're
just
an
doesn't work
investor
that way.
who is who looks at it like that, right? But if you are somebody who is looking to get funding for a company that you want to do, you have to do this stuff, right? I mean, like, you just kind of have to
And
go
it's
through
too
the
bad,
motions.
and I agree with that, and I think it's too bad because I think ultimately you're trying to make it more convenient for the investor than it is for yourself.
It is.
Yes.
And you're saying, okay, well, they will go through so many of these. They're creating their own structure for efficiency,
Right.
That doesn't really kind of essentially align itself with what you're supposed to be doing, just figuring things out.
Right.
The good investors are going to understand that the exercise of putting the plan together is just so that you did the homework to kind of think about it as critically as
Exactly.
possible.
Exactly.
That's what the
correct.
good investors. But the ones that don't really understand the notion of, oh well, they're going to hold you to a T as a result of what you said the forecast would be or what the plan looked like, are the ones that are obviously try to stay away from that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right.
I mean, if you're desperate, take money from where you need it. But I mean, like, you're right. I mean, like, that is not the kind of person you want
Right.
to be working with on a lot. Your investor's your partner, right? So, I
Right.
mean, like, you got to have
Yeah,
some
they should
degree
be
of
on your
comfort.
side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then speaking of investors, and just kind of as a blanket statement on this, I guess, is that don't get discouraged as a result of, if you're a startup and you kind of look at investors rejecting you for any reason, there's just could be a multitude of reasons
Right.
that it could be, and it just could be like and who knows what the reasons are, But I've seen a lot of companies, and I was there myself. I mean, when I was pitching companies, walking out the door, doubting my own startup as a result of investor
Saying, it's not gonna work.
It's not going to work. It's and you're like, who knows that and you have all the data. You have more data than the investor
Exactly.
does.
And you have the interest and the passion to do it.
Exactly.
So you're actually,
So,
if it is going to work out, it's going to work out because of you.
Right.
So I was at a talk by Anand Mahendra once, and he said something which I think makes a lot of sense to this, right? Basically, take advice from as many people as you want to as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, like, listen to everybody for everything, but
Yep.
at the end of it, don't substitute their judgment for yours.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because, I mean, like, you're the person who is going to run your business. You're the person who's going to know. You've looked into this. You spent time thinking about it. If you're a serious entrepreneur who's looking to do stuff, you spend serious time thinking about all things about your business. You don't know
Right.
everything, but you spend a lot of time thinking
Right.
about it. Don't let
But
anybody
consider it. That's the other thing.
Consider
you have
it,
to consider
yeah.
it. Like, it's like a lot of folks, like, I think you can get
You can get tunnel vision.
You
Yeah.
can get tunnel vision,
Yeah.
and almost never consider even what they're saying. But
No, I think you should consider and round out your
Yeah, exactly.
version
Yeah,
of it
hold
from
on,
all
100%.
the
Let me give you guys an example, right? Something that I've been struggling with recently. I'm looking so I'm talking to investors and I'm talking to different creative people, right? And one of the questions that a lot of different investors or financial people are talking to me about is, why don't you do video? Why don't you turn your audio stuff? Why don't you take all these podcasts and make video out of them?
Yeah.
And it's a interesting point of view, but then I think about how I think of this business, right? And I start thinking about it that if I start doing video, I am one of 75 companies in Bombay doing web video, and I'm not doing really great web video. The web video I'm doing it'll be the three of us sitting around, there'll be a camera shooting us, and we're putting it out. Now, all of a sudden, the tail will start wagging the dog because web video is going to get me bigger numbers than audio is going to get me today. But audio in the long term is the bigger market opportunity. There's nobody playing in this space today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, the thing is, but
Yeah.
I've spoken to probably 40 people about this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we spoke about it before.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if we could do one episode of video just to try it out.
Yeah.
But then,
Even
you never know.
if it's just a webcam showing us. I mean, there's this funny, crazy thing about amateurish looking content.
Right.
There's something UGC about it these days. Like the tolerance and the palatability of this
Is much higher, yeah.
is much higher now.
But then-
there's something organic about it now.
Yeah,
It's-
there is.
And the last thing I showed Raj just before we started this episode, again, just to contextualize this week, is a video on YouTube which has grossed 8.6 million views in a
Are
week.
you talking about...
I am talking about Dinchak Puja.
I'm still...
And I cannot believe I mentioned that on this podcast, but hey,
it's viral video, man.
It's viral video.
You just gave her another hit or another 10. That's the problem with remarkable content.
I think I read that she's doing a concert somewhere in Navi Mumbai.
We have no idea.
Why are we talking? No. This is not how it's supposed to go. What happened?
But, well, yeah, so this week, huh? But it's always a fun week in the online video world. You never know what's going to
You never know.
go crazy.
You get sucked into the vortex of that YouTube content.
Yeah.
But in all fairness, I think video is an interesting thing. I mean, as speaking as an investor here, my first, I think I would have said that first. That's the first thing I would say. I think my rebuttal against my own thought about having video is overhead.
Right.
Like this enormous overhead.
Exactly.
Right. You're like, oh gosh, I just add another layer. Then the question is like, is that overhead, worth it? Or is there essentially the counterweight to that, which is how much money can I make in video versus audio now based on the fact that video is maturing? And then the question is, again, how quality does the video have to be?
That's part of it. But then I think about like India and audio, right? And I think about spoken word audio. We have no talk radio here. So the opportunity that I'm trying to push over here is make my network the Indian equivalent of NPR, right?
Makes
so
sense.
This is talk radio.
No, I totally understand. That makes sense.
But you have to also see the kind of audience we have. So it's an interesting...
You're right? But again, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, right? So I've studied a lot of different radio markets.
Right.
And I see that there is in every market that is open, you'll see a 30-70 split between music and talk. So what that tells me is that 30% of the population behaviorally will prefer to listen to talk if it's available to them.
Right.
So,
but India is like such an exploding story right now. It's exploding on all fronts, whether it's banking, whether it's content. Content is exploding, and video is a big driver of that. But like you said, but audio is too. I'm happy to say that this is my third ever podcast in my life, and I'm well past 30. So I think if I'm beginning to enjoy this at this juncture, I'm sure a lot of other people will.
I will say this about podcasting, which I think is amazing, is that podcasts are itself a life hack. It's crazy how folks that are driving to work there's this kind of alignment around multitasking now.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is actually, and so if you talk to the folks that are life hacking their way through just efficiency and kind of all that,
they're the ones listening to this at 1.2x.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. They're taking it to the next level like that.
Yeah.
But just consuming content this way.
We all sound like chipmunks to them.
Yeah, we're different kinds of chipmunks. I don't know who's Alvin Theodore. But ultimately, this is how you ultimately kind of multitask in the future, right? Video is. I think there are people that that actually kind of take just the audio track of a YouTube clip.
Yeah,
which I actually wished existed.
I do that. We publish to YouTube. We publish with a steady image on it, and we get about 10% of our listenership from there.
Oh wow! Okay. I'm just wondering whether or not there's like the reverse of that, of like taking content that's on YouTube today
and
turning
it out.
We're working on some of that as well.
Cool. Yeah.
We're working on some of that kind of stuff as well.
I was absolutely. I think that there's a lot of content like that you're like, okay, the video is a nice to have, but it's not a must have.
It's not a must have.
Exactly.
It's not a must have. Never. No.
Yep.
No. So that's interesting. I mean, it's a whole new paradigm of consuming content, and I'm happy to see that there's a niche out there, but it's a growing niche.
Yeah, it is.
And again, coming back to an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for an India, which is a growing digital India, and it's just only gonna go bigger and go bigger. But coming back to opportunities, one of them, which we were again talking about this week earlier, is Bitcoin. What's your take on Bitcoin? I know, Raj, you have one whole Bitcoin.
I have one whole delicious Bitcoin at this very moment. I kept it a round number of 1. It's my index. And I think I'm considering cashing out.
No. What do you buy in at?
What's it at 2,000 right now?
It's at 2,000. I think it's just dropping. So it went up. It peaked at least I use CoinDesk, I think, as my kind of just
market,
to understand the rate, the exchange rate. And I get a little tweet every day that says, "Here's the rate" and stuff. And so it peaked at 2,800 thereabouts.
Okay.
And then now it's at 2,100.
So
it's like dropping by $130 a day.
Nah, don't cash out. But you bought it at
I bought it at $100, right? Yeah. Which retrospectively looks like, gosh, you got it in a really good deal. But at the time, it was like, what are you doing? It's $100. $100 for this currency that might. What are you doing? So everything in retrospect with Bitcoin sounds like
craziness.
Yeah, well, it's crazy, good. But then if you look at the graph, you're like, gosh, it's like growing.
But if you bought $100 worth of, this is just a pull from the stat from the web, but if you bought $100 worth of Bitcoin in 2010.
No.
In 2000, if you had,
okay.
in 2010 when the price was 30 cents.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
You'd have $79 million today.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Which means somebody actually did that.
And I'm sure a bunch of
the
people
Winklevoss twins are Bitcoin billionaires at this point.
Yes.
There was somebody who who paid for a pizza in Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, that's the first story.
Yeah,
that's the first
10,000
transaction
Bitcoin
ever.
for like 2 pizzas or something.
Yes,
like
that's the first
like
ever
that.
Bitcoin transaction.
That's just
and that brings me to the point of opportunity, which is the ongoing theme maybe today. But about how all of this is driven by a shadow economy.
Yes.
Where the price is being driven up simply because there are more and more people who want to use it, right?
Yep.
That's the only reason it's
interesting,
going
right?
up.
I mean, like, and that's one of the things that, this is one of the things that really kind of interests me about this, right? I don't understand the technology behind it that well, but what really interests me is this a currency or is this a commodity?
That is exactly the question to ask. Is this a stock? Or is this a currency that you actually use to transact with?
Yeah.
And if you're speculating, for me, it's a stock, right? I'm going to hold it. I'm never going to use it for any transactional purpose. It's going to sit there.
You can break it in pieces.
Isn't it?
You can. But then you know what you're saying. But considering the volatility right now,
Yeah, exactly, it's too unstable to
it's
consider.
too unstable. You might be spending a fraction that is essentially you might buy let's just imagine you could buy a pizza today, like at somewhere, and say, oh yeah, I'm going to buy it at $10 of Bitcoin, quote unquote. I'm going to break off a piece of my 1 Bitcoin. I'm going to buy it for 10. The next day, essentially,
that 10's worth 14.
Exactly. You're like, oh my god, I paid $140 for a pizza because you're like because you actually value. So you're like, I'd rather wait for it to stabilize, and that's the irony of the whole thing.
But then, will it stabilize? Right? Because I mean, like,
will it? Yeah, exactly. And it's moving in single digit percentages.
And there's so many different competitors to it who are trying to come up with this kind of thing, right? There's so many other cryptocurrencies that are going to come up, and they're all going to show that same volatility at the initial stages.
Yep.
And so, I mean, like, to me, it just feels like I understand the utopian idea behind it, right? Currency without borders, something which is completely private and secure. I get that part of it. Also, I understand the idea of how it's created and how interesting and kind of like, how everybody's incentives are well aligned to kind of make sure that this currency keeps circulating and keeps growing, the supply keeps growing. I get all that, but it just feels like, how do you, for currency to really be a currency, there needs to be an underlying stability to it. Otherwise, we're living in Zimbabwe every day.
So there's definitely stability issues. I think the way I would rate or rank or evaluate Bitcoin is the number of transactions per day, based on people use.
That's actually a very good metric.
That's how you know it's actually valued, and you might not know why it's being used or for what purpose. But that's and right now the curve, it is growing in transactional volume, right? I think in terms of how you increase transactional volume, I think that I have a specific theory around people need to look at Bitcoin as I'd rather get Bitcoin for whatever my service was than get nothing. Right, like I'd rather. So my example is, and I don't know if this is a good idea or just an ultimately disastrous one, but it's in the U.S. there's a massive the custom of tipping people. You're tipping the bus driver, you're tipping the waitress or the server. There's this kind of culture of tipping,
right?
And I routinely have either no money in my pocket in terms of cash,
right,
or I have a $20 bill. And I don't want to give a tip of $20 bill, and I end up in this awkward situation where the guy's handing me my bag from a shuttle bus, and I don't have cash, and I go, and then he goes, and he's kind of sour about the whole thing, and he gets back in. So, if he were wearing a lapel pin, or there was some QR code that I could scan, and just here, boom, and he's like, I got $2, I don't even care, and he's incentivized now to go convert that back into dollars because he's like, I got $2. It's like, I just sent you some Bitcoin.
You could do that with Venmo. You could do that with
you can do that
with a wallet. You can do that with ATM.
So you absolutely could. So this culture. So what the thesis is, or this is kind of a crazy thought again. So I'm not getting too carried away with this, but he's motivated. I'm motivated because I want to be able to have an infinitely divisible currency,
Right.
and he's motivated because he wants to get paid no matter how he can.
Right, but ultimately he wants it in dollars.
He does, which is fine. So it becomes an instrument of division and conversion.
But doesn't a wallet serve the same purpose without the unnecessary conversion to a volatile?
You're right. But the real question is, how does it get promoted, right? So again, it's less about the currency as it is about someone saying,
but you have to sign up for the wallet, you have to have an identity,
Exactly.
you have to have a paper trail.
Facebook Messenger,
in that way,
WhatsApp.
Bitcoin is as close to cash as it can.
I actually see
no one
WeChat-
knows who gave you the cash.
I see what WeChat does in China as probably the more natural evolution than something like Bitcoin. Because what WeChat does in China, where you can make micropayments through QR codes, that to me feels... But you're doing it through real
But
currency.
you're forgetting the fact that cash is cash. No one knows who gave you the cash. And Bitcoin is more like that. And not like,
I don't know
I got
that
this money from this person.
In the world of Aadhaar, do we care about that in India?
That is a subject for our
So it's
next
funny you
chat.
mentioned WeChat.
Yeah.
So Kik, the Canadian, I guess messenger equivalent.
Yeah.
They just announced their own cryptocurrency-based currency, I guess.
Interesting.
That was like in the last couple of days. I don't know what ends up happening with that. I think there is this idea that someone big has to be the
backer.
promoter, the backer of the currency like that. But and actually that company Brave, the browser Brave, which is basically an ad block browser. It's basically a browser that blocks ads. Is actually launching their own cryptocurrency, so that you can actually pay for content. As opposed to seeing ads. Essentially,
Right.
It's like, hey, you know what? I just earned some currency for browsing the web using this browser, and then hey CNN, you should be getting a few coins of whatever kind. But just to go back to this notion of Bitcoin to me, it has to be, like the necessity, a tool of transaction where there is no alternative, right? Like there is an alternative, and you can, it boots up from the ground up. This is my personal thesis on that. That's why I think of this situation. I go back to this crazy concept of, and hear me out on this, but ultimately you have this, just imagine this experience, and then you guys tell me if this is crazy or not, but just imagine this experience where there is behind the driver in a shuttle bus, this is maybe probably a U.S. use case more than it is in India, but just listen to this. There's a QR code and a little sign that says, "I accept Bitcoin as tips," right? Which is ridiculous to think about, but maybe in the future this happens.
Yeah.
Scan this QR code, right? And they scan it, and it says, "You need to have this app to be able to send me Bitcoin," right? And the reason why that's important is I'm sitting in the shuttle bus for 10 minutes. I have the opportunity to go down that app right now, and I'm trying to avoid this very awkward moment.
Yeah.
So I shoot the Bitcoin to him. He gets a push notification that says, because you just
Got
got
a tip,
earned. And you can even do the conversion rate in the push notification, say, this amounts to this many dollars.
Yeah.
And so he's now motivated to withdraw it in dollars. Now, again, he ultimately wants it in dollars. Maybe he'll be a speculative. Maybe he understands Bitcoin and says, I'll keep it in Bitcoin. I might be able to make more, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's this idea of, he doesn't have an alternative. Like, he just wants to get paid. He's like, gosh, man, I live for tips. If I don't get my tips, there's an entire industry. There's servers that get paid $1.50, $2 an hour base wage, and they make money from the tips, right?
Yeah.
And so,
that's a whole entire ecosystem of.
But that's just a use
economy.
case, right? But I think, just generally speaking, there needs to be this necessity orientation. I think, unfortunately, right now, Bitcoin is a fantastic tool for laundering, right?
Yeah.
And which is unfortunately the case.
And actually, that brings up another point, right? I mean, so far, as long as it's a commodity, I think governments stay hands off on it. The second it starts replacing as currency, I don't know that governments stay hands off on it.
No, a lot of governments are obviously trying to get their hands in and regulate this.
Yeah.
India finally does have some regulation around it.
They have some around it, yeah.
We'll try to have someone on who can help us walk this through so that a lot of people can understand this better. But I think we had a good chat. I think this has been awesome today to have you here, Raj, and
thank you very
talk
much.
startups and talk tech, and hope to have you on Skype sometime down the line, talking to us from Austin or whenever you're back.
Or maybe you guys beta test video.
Yeah.
Or run that experiment and see what happens.
Well, let's do that.
That's another experiment to run, you know.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
we should. We're going to try all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah,
That's
that's startup life.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I know we can keep chatting for a while, but I think even at 1.2x, we're on the meter. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much for having me.
Just before we end, guys, remember you can catch us on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podcast, all the podcast apps that you could think of. We would really, really, really appreciate ratings and reviews on iTunes or any of the podcast apps that you use.
Yeah.
And also, I will set up the Shunya One Slack channel. So if you guys use Slack, come to the website, ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1, and over there you will find a button which will be able to take you to, or which will allow you to request the invitation to the Slack channel.
And Raj, since you're here, how do people reach you? You want to give a shout out to your Twitter? Or
Sure. You can follow me at Niyogi. N is in Nancy, I is in India, Y is in Yoga, O is in Orange, G is in George, I is in India.
Wow.
On Twitter. I don't know. I didn't even know if I did that right, but whatever. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Just follow me on Twitter, I guess.
Or find him on AngelList, where he sometimes does drunk investments in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
I don't think you want people
so
to say
easy.
that. I think you really
so
don't want
fun
to
and
say
so
that.
easy. Yeah.
But thanks to Naval for that.
Yeah,
because
making it so easy for all of
Yes.
us. I will say that it's been a lot. I mean, it's fun to do it on AngelList, but it's a lot more fun to invest off of AngelList. Believe it or not,
Yes.
I still think that the traditional way is a very effective
Yes,
way.
catching up over beers in random
That's
pubs in Bangalore.
That's where magic is made.
That's where it happens. All right. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening, and
Thank you.
We'll catch you next week. Thank you.
एक्सक्यूज मी भैया, एक्सक्यूज मी,
बोलिए मैडम।
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वैक्स है, आईवीएम लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, ड्रिंक्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है और द फैन गराज है। आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम। आप जाओ ivmpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप, सब आपकी उंगलियों पे।